and welcome back. Our second conversation this morning is all about screwworm. I know it has been making the news fairly recently that there has been a new screwworm, if I could identify it as such.
Yes.
And with us in studio this morning is Willie Chan. He is a technical coordinator at AICA, and he is here to talk to us about the new screwworm. Now, first of all, Mr. Chan, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Let's begin by talking about screwworm. What are these insects, if I could describe it as such, and how problematic are these insects in terms of livestock, in terms of any other animals that may be affected?
Okay, thank you for having me here. So, New World screwworm, that's the name. And the scientific name is Cochleomia hominivorax. Hominivorax in Spanish means devoradora de hombre, or man-eater if you translate it literally.
Wow. Don't scare us.
It is a serious threat.
Wow.
Right now, it is right across our borders in Guatemala. Yesterday,
Guatemala.
A case was confirmed.
Wow.
So 30 years ago, it was in Belize.
I remember 30 years ago there was a screwworm eradication project.
Correct.
Go ahead.
So it was eradicated in 92, 93 from Belize, and that was done through a cooperation agreement between the Mexican government, the US government, and also the Panamanian government. In terms of impact, it has a huge economic impact. I would say more than $100 million if it will affect our industry.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So in terms,
And this is regionally, or
that would be just Belize.
just Belize, $100 million.
Yes.
Are we just to rebound with our cattle industry?
Right.
Yeah.
So you could have an idea
Yeah.
of the threat that we have right across our borders.
I think what a lot of us are trying to understand is what exactly takes place if we do see the first case of screwworm here in Belize being so close to our border. What particular livestock will be impacted? Does this affect humans even?
Okay, so this one affects all warm-blooded species, including humans. It's a fly. So the fly, what it does, it finds an open wound or even nasal cavities, ears, eyes, or the female and male reproductive parts of animals.
Yeah.
And it lays its egg there. The fly has a cycle of 21 days. So after about 12 hours, these eggs would hatch, and then they would start to burrow into the open wound and start to eat.
Yeah.
The difference with other flies is that this requires a living host. So it requires something that is alive. So for example, the ones that you see on a dead animal, that's a different type of fly. That's a macellaria. So that only feeds on dead carcasses. But this one requires a living
Warm
tissue.
host.
Right. And each fly has the capacity to lay between 200 to 350 eggs.
Whoa.
And it can lay 3 times within its life cycle.
My gosh.
So you can imagine it's...
Yeah. You've
Close to
identified the issue.
Yeah.
My question is, how do we now either make an attempt to prevent this from, crossing over our border, or once it has been identified in Belize, what can be done by AICA and of course by the Ministry of Agriculture?
Okay, so right now we are doing a collaboration with AICA, OIRISA, which is the International Regional Organization for Agricultural Health, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food Security and Enterprise, and BAHA, of course, the Belize Agricultural Health Authority, since they are the competent authority that see anything related to both animal and plant health. What we are doing is, because in Belize it is not present as yet, we are doing what we call a sanitary education campaign, which is monitor your livestock, monitor your pets. If you see any open wound, treat it, make sure it is dry, make sure it cures, because the fly only will deposit on an open wound or on nasal cavities.
Yeah.
What is the trend right now in most of the other countries is that in newborn animals, the fly would target the nipple.
Yeah.
So there is where they have issues, and in most of these cases, livestock are just left in the fields, in the pastures, So you wouldn't know if a newborn, if you don't have a strict control in terms of when the cattle would give birth, then you wouldn't know if your cattle has given birth. And it just requires, 12 hours for a fly to reach there
and then the rest is
deposit the
history.
eggs. And
To
Are
the
there
best of your knowledge, has there been sort of a regional response to this?
Yes, we are currently doing implementing a regional program. It is funded by the USDA and also through OIRSA and through AICA. AICA is leading everything that has to do with communication and awareness. And of course, like I mentioned, it's not AICA alone. This is being done in collaboration, in partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture, with BAHA, with OIRSA. But at the regional level, OIRSA is the one who is looking at it, and there are plans in place that are already ongoing, especially in the countries that were affected. Like I mentioned, it was eradicated about 30 years ago. However, this pest is endemic in South America. There is a plant in Panama, in Pacora, which is COPEG. It's a collaboration between the US and the Panamanian government. And what they do in that plant is that they produce sterile males, and then they release them in the environment. Because the female only needs to mate once. After that, she just lays her eggs and then she would die off. Her life cycle is about 30 days.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. But
We
the
have-
male is the one that can mate more than once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we have been joined in studio by Belarmino Esquivel. He's the Principal Agricultural Officer with the Ministry of Agriculture.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for giving us this space.
Yes, so we're talking about the New World screwworm and what appears to be an imminent threat right next door to us in Guatemala. Can you speak to us from the Ministry of Agriculture's perspective as to the monitoring and evaluation of what's happening across the border and perhaps our state of preparedness in terms of being able to have farmers aware of this particular threat?
First and foremost, I want to explain the impact that this screwworm may potentially has on our industry, particularly the beef cattle industry.
Yeah.
But under the One Health approach, we have collectively come together, AICA, OIRSA, the Belize Agriculture Health Authority, and the Ministry of Agriculture to ensure that we have and we devise the plans, the preparedness plans that will allow us to prevent first of all the entry of this pest. And if it gets into Belize, we already have the protocols, we have a plan that has been strategically developed for us to control the pest. And there is a sensitization process. Even before the pest gets into Guatemala, we had already started with the awareness. So we have already started in Toledo district with an active campaign, and we have already trained 140 officers of different ministry, BAHA veterinarians, extension officers, Belize Livestock Producers Association agents, and we are closely working with the Belize Livestock Producers Associations, who basically have registered more than 6,000 farmers, and we continue to appear in TV shows like these ones so that we can sensitize the general public so that they become aware of the threat, how to identify, more so importantly, and who to call. And once that call gets to our offices, where it's the BAHA, Ministry, ICA, or OIRSA, we already have technical people who have been trained how to take sample, how to identify. We have an entomologist who has been trained abroad. The Ministry of Agriculture has also engaged in going to other countries that have had this incidence and are already, we have looked at their plans, and we basically, what we have done was take those plans and Belizeanize our own plans and have our own people on guard. Right now, our major concern is prevent. It is in Guatemala, and we are not saying, and it is an imminent trend, as you clearly stated. And obviously what we want to do is to prevent as much as possible from coming in. But because of we trade, and there's movement of animals and humans from one country to the next, there's always a possibility that that pest can get into the country. So we have to be very much prepared, and we're into a plan now to even run a simulation exercise.
Yeah.
What are the signs that farmers or persons that own livestock can look to if they believe that their pets or animals may be affected with the screwworm fly?
Even before looking at signs, I would tell the farmers, the cattle farmers or the livestock farmers, to basically take good care of their animals. For the fly to penetrate the tissue or the animal, they will need an opening. They will need a laceration. They will need a mucous membrane. So they will have to be very alert, very vigilant, for them to be very observant. And if there's at any point any maggots or any larvae that is moving, to quickly get into it, identify, call, because there is a process of calling and then having the right competent authority coming in, or the technician, to make an evaluation and assessment of how this particular larvae looks at. And if it is screwworm, then thereafter are sprays that are used to control the larvae, and that would be the most effective way for them to prevent from spreading and from controlling the pest.
Every so often there is this concern about screwworm, in this particular case, the Mediterranean fruit fly in another case. It's always about these insects that are essentially preying on our ability to access food, because that's what it essentially boils down to. I was mentioning to Mr. Chan earlier that we're only just properly rebounding in terms of our livestock industry with cattle exports and what have you. I know we have this particular threat looming that stands to affect our industry. Mr. Chan was saying that if this comes to pass, we're looking at $100 million in potential losses. How is the Ministry of Agriculture bracing for this, from an economic perspective, naturally?
Well, the social and economic impact could be serious.
Yeah.
As I had already stated, there's about 6,000 farmers in the entire country of Belize, from Toledo to Corozal. So the livestock per se has allowed for people to make a livelihood. And it is second to the sugar industry, contributing to the growth and development of our economy. So certainly when you look at our national herd, which is approximately 200,000 animals, and the amount of exports that we have, about between 35 and 40,000 animals that are exported every year, generating over $60 million just in sales. And then when you add on the local sales, I mean for the domestic market, that drives you to $90 to $100 million. Now, one of the facts that we have to be cognizant is that we trade with Mexico. We have initiated a formal export of cattle to Mexico. And what that could happen is that could come to a stop. Meaning that if the screwworm is detected in Belize and it is confirmed, then there is a notification to the World Organization, World Animal Health Organization, in terms of that it is here. And then from that day we start to control and eradicate the pest. But it is until then that we have completely eradicated the pest. We will have until 12 months, 12 to 18 months that we have to be free. So eradicating doesn't mean, so that means all that cattle that goes to Mexico and that money that is generated, foreign exchange that is generated, is put at a stop.
So that stop means that these cattle
will no longer go to Mexico.
But will they be treated? Is this something that if they are infected with screwworm, that it can't be treated?
Once you have screwworm, one of the requirements, when it comes to the sanitary control measures, export requirements, is that there are some diseases that will not allow you to trade with our countries. And this is one of those, and Mexico has indicated to us that if it is found and if it is confirmed, immediately we expect that will come to a halt. It becomes a halt, and we will continue to, of course, to seek measures to eradicate it as quickly as possible. So, but for now, to prevent it from coming in.
I know this is from the ministry's perspective, but what is Baja's role in all of this? Because we're looking at, if it is identified in Belize, there's a suspension of exports. But we're also looking at imports. Where is Baja in all of this? Can you speak on that?
There are two particular. Certainly, Baja is the competent authority in terms of maintaining agricultural health in Belize, in terms of animal health, plant health, and human health, because this is a zoonotic disease, meaning that it can impact humans, all warm-blooded animals. So obviously they have a tendency to attack more the livestock, the beef cattle, the dairy cattle, but it can affect cats, it can affect dogs. So certainly Baja, as the competent authority, has to ensure that there are movement restriction controls. We are being we're looking at the south because it is more closer there where the detection or the confirmation of the screwworm in Guatemala was found. Isabal, if I'm not mistaken, which is very near to our southern border. So one of our strategic, what Baja currently is doing is to reinforce movement controls, and from an importation perspective, we have to ensure that everything that comes into this country is clean.
Yeah.
So even that's from outside to inside. Now, from an internal standpoint, movement controls will be placed, restrictions. We are also re-engineering the movement permit, which the BLPA, Belize Livestock Producers Association, issues, because there is a mandatory law that for every cattle farmer to move one animal from one farm to the next, or from one district to the next, they require a movement permit that the animals are tagged.
Yeah.
So basically, any animal moving will have to come down, will have to be inspected, have to be treated for wounds, and if let's say the screwworm is detected in Toledo, no animals will be allowed to traverse to other parts of the country, just so to avoid the spread.
Yeah. Do we have sufficient manpower though? Because that's perhaps the next question to ask. When you look at what you've mentioned, 200,000 heads of cattle and the possible outbreak in one part of the country, do we have sufficient people on the ground to be able to contain?
Well, scarce resources will always be a limitation, but that has not refrained us from devising and coming together with ICA, with the USDA, through OIRSA, who has given us funding already, and then working collectively with the private sector, with the Belize Livestock Producers Association, with the Belize Agricultural Health Authority. So like I said, this is a collective approach. This is not a one-man show. So I think that has allowed us to not duplicate efforts. So also, it was just a recent justification kind of cabinet paper went to Ministry of Finance and to request for additional funding so that we are prepared. I don't think we were expecting for us to be reactive. We have been proactive. I think we have the plans, we have the protocols, we have trained our people. We started with the sensitization process, and the trainings are going at the district level. We have a series of media appearances. We have had brochures. We are developing videos, commercials, and we are targeting even at the community level, shipyard community, major producing areas, where we are sensitizing the farmers. So yes, scarce resources is a limitation, but I think we've been fortunate enough to come together collectively with the different institutions. And right now, as we speak, there is also a submission for a tripartite, Belize, Guatemala, and Mexico, to look at a bigger plan, because Mexico does not want the screwworm. The United States does not want the screwworm. And we know of the socioeconomic negative impacts this may potentially have on Mexico and the United States of America. So they are also putting funds, but we have to have the plans, and we have to have a clear and strategic direction how we're going to prevent, how we're going to control, how we're going to eradicate this pest.
And you need to act now before it actually enters or crosses our borders. As we wind down this conversation, I want us to pinpoint key information that our viewers need to know as it relates to the screwworm fly. Of course, what it is, who or what it impacts, what are the worst case scenarios if a person or a livestock is impacted as well.
So the main thing, like I mentioned before, was monitor your animals, inspect them daily, make sure that there's no lacerations, no open wound, and if there is, treat them until they are cured. Then the other one, if in the event that you would find a wound that is infested, immediately notify the competent authority. In this case, it would be Baja. But then also we are also asking for the farmers or the public to also inform the relevant district agriculture offices, also the Belize Livestock Producers Association. And we are also working in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, because as I mentioned, it also affects humans. So we are working with them, and we are working with the Forestry Department, Department of Environment. So there are people who are going to be trained in terms of how to collect a sample, how to send the sample to the lab. Once it is identified, that sample needs to be taken. It needs to be sent to the lab for confirmation, and the infected animal needs to be treated until it's cured. Now, one thing that we don't want to create a misconception is that because the animal is infected, it won't be good anymore. No, the animal will still be good. It might lose quality in terms of the skin and the wound, but if you treat it properly and it cures, that animal is still valuable.
So it means that we can distribute it locally, but just not for trade.
No, once it is infested, you would have to quarantine it until it is cured. That animal will not be able to move from the point where it is identified. So it will have to be separated from the rest of your animals, and then once it is cured, then you could reintegrate it into the farm.
Bear in mind that if there is an identification of this pest and in a particular location, one of the immediate response of Baja is to quarantine the area, meaning that you will have a buffer area zone of 20 kilometers at the minimum or so that we won't allow it. What farmers need to understand that it is not only a laceration or a cut or a wound where they can deposit the fly can deposit the eggs, but even when they are administering ear tagging, whenever they are doing injection intramuscular, intravenous, even when they are removing a tick. Once there is an opening, even mucous membranes, the vulvas, the anus, the nostrils of the animals, the eyelids, the fly can also lay eggs. So they have to be very vigilant in terms of watching their animals every day and ensuring that whenever there is parturition, for example, and they have to treat the nipple cord, they have to treat it well whenever they're dehorning. So there are some other areas that will have an opening. They need to treat it well so that they can avoid this fly from just laying eggs and creating the damage that it creates on tissue.
All right.
Well, gentlemen, as we wrap up this segment, we want to say thank you for taking the time to come and visit us, and of course using our platform to share this information with the necessary personnel. As we wrap up this conversation, I'll give you an opportunity to share some final thoughts.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, this is, as Bellarmine had mentioned, this is one of the approach or the avenues that we are using to be able to sensitize. So be on the lookout. Do not move animals illegally, and if you see something, report it immediately.
Thank you so much for giving us this space, this opportunity to speak to the general public. And I would tell the cattle farmers that it will impact your pocket. So it is not a Ministry of Agriculture responsibility, Belize Agricultural Health Authority or IRSA. It is more so important for the cattle farmers to be very vigilant to treat their animals, as it is them who will be directly impacted by not taking care of their animals. So I ask them that if they need help, just to call us, and we are very receptive to listen to their concern and more so willing to attend to their needs that in terms of treating this pest.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you guys all the best.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, the conversation switches into Belize going green in the top 100 sustainable destinations.